And welcome to another episode of Shining Light on Shadows. I'm Dawn Helmrich, and I will be hosting today's show. Neil Perrock, my co-host, is not on sabbatical. He isn't taking a well-deserved break. Instead, Neil is my very special guest on today's show. I am so excited, everyone, to be hosting the show today. I'm a little nervous, and I'm really going to try very hard to do as much of this as I possibly can so that Neil can really be the center of attention for this show today. This month is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and next month is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we're doing this show today to kind of bridge that gap. I wanted to give a little bit of a background as to how this show came about. As many of you probably know, Neil started this show, came up with the idea to do this show because he had co-hosted a podcast with Candace Sanchez that was specifically about male survivors of sexual assault. And during that show, he recognized that the theme of mental health kept coming up over and over and over again. And he himself was tackling some mental health issues that he had never really talked about. And so that's kind of how this came about. I wanted to welcome everybody who's tuning in right now. Please comment in the comments section. Let us know who you are and where you're from. Please let Neil know that you're here. I know that he could use the support, that he's a little nervous and I'm a little nervous. So Neil had been sharing his journey of mental health with me and with some other people kind of privately. And he really wanted to do something that would kind of put this on the forefront and reduce the stigma of mental health. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. I wanted to take a minute and just talk about my blog post, because when Neil decided that he wanted to do this show, I was going to just let him do his own blog post and I was going to leave it alone. And he said, no, do a blog post. And my blog post is really about watching Neil transpire over the past year and a half, from really shying away from talking about his own experiences around mental health to becoming this amazing advocate for himself and for other people, and really creating a community that helps people to talk more about their own mental health journeys. And that's really the platform, is we've had people on the show that have been talking about their own mental health. We've had therapists, we've had mindfulness coaches, and it's really been inspiring. I am going to introduce Neil, and then I am going to bring in some of the comments. So Neil, I'm so excited to welcome you to your own show. How does that feel?
It is kind of crazy. I count 4 minutes on the clock. That's the longest I've been quiet at the beginning of a show.
That's why I brought you in now.
No, and it definitely it was an interesting experience, even for those first few minutes, because I got to do some of the stuff that I do in the background, not all of it. So I do want to. I'm going to kind of lift that veil. Dawn went live. She put the graphics up. She put the went back to the header. That let me do some things on Twitter, and I shared the link to her blog post in Facebook while we were talking. But I was off camera for that whole time, and I was listening. And what was interesting is, as you were introducing me, I'm like, she's probably bringing me on camera in just, and I don't even know if I got back to the screen before or after you brought me on, but thank you, Dawn. I don't think that I can really put it in words in terms of how important a role you've played over this last year plus doing this show. And I took a quick peek at the comments. I may not look at the comments right away to keep that sense of being the guest. But I think I saw Candace was watching because I looked at Facebook, and really between you and Candace, doing that first show around being a survivor of sexual assault, and really it starts. This was the blog post I wrote, a journey of discovery and healing. That I was 7 years old when my neighbor came and said he wanted to do a Cub Scout project, and it was anything but. But Candace helped me go through that process of talking about that experience. This was back in 2023, and I always say that I felt it was harder to talk about mental health than my abuse history. But we got through that year, and I will say, Dawn, that as challenging as it's been a little bit this year for me, and kind of the anxiety and nervousness, ask Candace how bad I was the beginning of that show. Oh my God, I was a absolute mess. And I remember the first couple episodes, we would tape them and then watch them like 2 months later, just the way we produced that show. And I was so worked up and so nervous. I was on the phone with her watching, and I'd walk out of my office when the episode was done and return to my family. And I was completely out of it for, another hour, 2 hours. You and I are kind of doing this with a little bit more relaxed. We can do the show. We can laugh a little. I walk out of here feeling good about what's going on, and it's a very different world right now.
Which is actually, Neil, a really, really good transition into how different you are compared to what you were even a year and a half ago. And before we get into that story, I want to bring in a couple of comments and acknowledge some people who are here.
My hands are off. I'm going to let you run that.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick Taylor. I'm not sure if you know who Patrick Taylor is, but Patrick Taylor is watching.
Patrick is Steve Taylor's father. We did that tribute to Steve a couple of weeks ago. Patrick, thanks so much for watching. I know Eileen commented on the post I put on Facebook as well.
That's awesome. That's great. That's great. And we have Jonathan, who says, greetings from New York. Looking forward to this show because I've always had a short attention span, and it never occurred to me that there might be a connection to my chronic depression. Very good, Jonathan. I'm so glad that you're here with us.
Interesting.
Yeah, that this will be really good for him to hear kind of your situation. I believe this is your mother that is watching from Hastings-on-Hudson. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hi, Mom.
We have Paula Krieger
before you go to Paula's. I do want to recognize that your mom passed 5 years ago, and I think it was yesterday, or
it was yesterday.
Was it yesterday?
Yeah, it was
the anniversary. So yes. I wanted to. I know how hard that is for you, and I want to acknowledge that. I would like to think that she's been watching as well.
I'm sure she has. And you're not supposed to make me cry. Like, I'm trying to host here. But yes, it is. It's always very difficult day for me. But in some wonderful ways as well. I got to really remember her yesterday. So that was really good. So Paula Krieger, hello from Tallahassee. She says, I'm sorry I can't hang around. Thank you, Neil, for your share. you'll help people and hopefully find strength yourself from doing this. And thank you, Dawn, for hosting. Thank you, Paula, so much for
Paula
happening.
had a front row to a lot of my kind of. She could probably think back to some of the conversations we had, and instead of thinking of its anxiety, it's the ADHD that came through when we were producing the New York Times show. I would call her on Saturdays. I'd call her after the show. She's in Valdosta, Georgia, or maybe on her way for her. She had a granddaughter recently, so she's going to spend time with family. Thank you, Paula.
That's awesome. Thank you, Paula. Congratulations. Candace, so glad that Candace is watching. She's been a huge supporter of me and of you and of us. She says, "You got this," with lots of hand claps and hearts, and you do have this. And then the man that is called my husband said, "You're doing a great job hosting," and he's very proud of you and has said so on multiple occasions. He was very excited for this show as well.
Thank you, Jim.
Yep. And then I believe this is your sister.
This is my sister,
correct?
Amy. Yes.
Yes. She's here to support. To let you know that you are loved unconditionally. Thank you, Amy. That's very, very sweet.
Thanks, Amy.
My dear friend and neighbor who's watching from downstairs says hello. She says, "I've got this." And Neil, I'm so proud of you for this show. And thank you so much for sharing your mental health journey tonight. You guys are the best. Super sweet.
I want to say Kate actually reached out, I think, right after I put out the blog post with a very heartfelt, very long message. She also shared stuff publicly. But Kate, thank you so much for reaching out. It really did mean a lot. It helped all the people that commented or reached out by text and email, direct messages on different platforms. I've gone through a week. It was relatively easy to write the blog post and put it out the first day, and then I hit a wall on Tuesday. And I was, what am I doing? What am I really doing this? Is this something that worth doing? And it was messages like Kate's that really gave me that confidence I needed that it's worth putting it out there.
That's awesome. That's really great. Candace says, "LOL, Neil, longest you've been quiet. Haha, love it. So proud of you and the transformation we are witnessing." And obviously this must be his theme, because your oh, I lost it. Your sister.
I'm sure he said something about that.
Oh, Neil,
Did you lose it? You got to scroll back up.
I'm trying, but it's not working.
I'll take a look real quick.
All right.
Let's see. I see Amy's, and then right, it's right after Candace's. It was we used to play a game when we were kids to see who could be quiet the longest. Amy always lost, but now I think the tables are turned.
It looks like it. Looks like it. And then Stefan Kaplan, "Hi Neil, always in your corner and here to support. You are helping others by sharing your brave journey with all, and we appreciate it."
Thank you, Stefan. Stefan was a guest on our show last summer.
That's
was Kate,
excellent.
As was Candace, as was Jim.
Yes. Yes, the tried and the true. All right, I want to talk a little bit about your blog post, Neil.
Sure.
When I read your blog post, I was completely blown away. First of all, it was incredibly detailed. And I learned so much from reading it about ADHD, adult ADHD. But it was also really emotional and really heartfelt. And I so appreciated your candor and your honesty. And you could even sense just a little bit of fear and nervousness in your post. So could you talk a little bit about what that was like writing that, and a little bit about your post?
Sure. It was uh, it was definitely nerve wracking. Uh, you know, of I was able to sit down and uh, write the post. I knew what I wanted to say, and it really in at the end of our last episode, I I didn't. I wasn't saying that I was going to talk about ADHD. I in the descriptions of the episode, we talk about who our next guest is, um, and it really wasn't until the very end of the show that I made a judgment call to even mention use the phrase, because I hadn't really told a lot of people about it up till that point, much less obviously with the blog post and the social media post. I wrote the post in a couple hours on Saturday. It kind of all flowed out. Um, I sat on it for a day. I had a couple people read it. I sent it to you and a few others just to make sure that I was hitting the right tone. Um, Added a few clarifying points, but I really wanted to explain what I've been going through. What the when I first got the diagnosis last fall, it threw me for a loop. I didn't feel. Some people feel when they get that kind of diagnosis, it's a lifting a burden. They feel relieved. I didn't really feel relieved at the time. I felt like I had a different burden I had to carry, and it took me several months to kind of figure out what it meant and how it played out for me, and what some of the kind of traits were. Um, I wrote about RSD, which is rejection sensitive dysphoria. Um, when I first learned about that, I actually first learned about it in the online screening in the survey. They had like several questions about it, and as I read it, it was like, wow, that's exactly what I'm feeling. I definitely had that sense that like, uh, you know, someone is in the room with me. Um, they can, they have like hidden cameras or something because they're describing my behavior. I want to put up the traits real quick, and I'll make it a little bigger for folks. Um, you know, a big thing about, and it was important. I wanted to give a link to kind of a reputable source, but it's very easy for people to feel embarrassed and self-conscious, low self-esteem, trouble believing in themselves, um, containing emotions when feeling rejected. Um, they're often people pleasers. Anyone who knows me, at any point in time, whether family or high school, college, professional life, like people pleaser is just a you know it's kind of an obvious one to describe me. Um, Being afraid of failure, and that's a big thing. I shared examples in the blog post about how I didn't go. I remember having presentations in school that I would just not go in when I had to like give a report, and it doesn't make sense when I think about it now because I was a good student. I mean, this is like for my favorite class. For anyone from high school watching, uh, I'm embarrassed to say it. Not that he's watching, but Mr. Rittner, for 10th grade, for 12th grade AP European history, which was my thing, even for something I felt so good about, I didn't go in I know at least once or twice because I didn't feel good about the report that I had to give, which just doesn't. I mean, that's part of a lot of it, Dawn, is when I think about how it plays out for me as an adult, and it's different. At some, I want to talk a little bit about adult ADHD, but the way it plays out for me, there's a lot of it that doesn't make sense. It's like not logical. Like when I describe it to someone, um, I'm hearing the words and I'm like, okay, this is what it means for me, but it there's no I can't even believe the words I'm saying. And so there's a lot of that involved as well. It's just a lot of disbelief. But when you realize that this is all because of, it's not anxiety and depression, but it's ADHD and RSD, and the anxiety and depression is an outgrowth of that. It really does change things.
Yeah, so you were talking a little bit about, your high school experience, and I know that we've had conversations about adult ADHD and what that is versus youth ADHD or childhood ADHD. Can you talk a little bit about your experience having adult ADHD, and like, do you feel like you had youth ADHD as well, or it just kind of like happened through high school as you got older? Talk a little bit about that,
Yeah,
please.
that's a good question and a good distinction to make. So, and I'll say even for myself, not understanding ADHD, all that well just yet, and certainly not being an expert, and not really having understood it when I was in middle school or high school. I succumbed to the what I think is a stereotype around ADHD, which is like a 10-year-old boy bouncing off the walls that just can't kind of sit in the chair, just can't pay attention and focus, and maybe talking a mile a minute. um and I don't, I if I think back, I don't know if I don't think I had that kind of behavior, and I certainly, no one identified that in me, and no one, because there are other people. And I actually had a friend of mine from high school. I saw he wrote a blog post just recently about having ADHD and being on medication, when this is a classmate of ours, having ADHD from like the age of 10 or something. So um I don't think that those typical behaviors were in evidence when I was younger. Um, it's, you look back with the understanding you have now, for adult ADHD. What I understand, and from the coaching that I've been that I signed up for, that I'm getting, the support I'm getting, this it's a the group where I did my testing. There's a group called Calibrate ADHD. We'll share a little bit more about that later. But what I've learned is, one of the kind of main traits is that uh, it's either hyper focus and high intensity, very productive, or like zero intensity, low intensity, no, not really no focus. It's not like, kind of all over the place, but it's kind of like the way that the coach, this woman, Kirby, describes it. Most people will live their life, whether it's work or home or whatever, between like a 40 and 60 in terms of their energy level, right? They don't get too low, they don't get too high. They're kind of like in this middle cone. And people with ADHD live a lot of their life at like 90 or even 100, or you push it even more than that, like just absolutely in overdrive. And that's not sustainable. And so then, after a couple of days of that, or a week, or just a lot of productive time, there's no like, let's slow down and just take it easy. It's, you go all the way to the other side and you stop. Your body, the way I wrote it in the blog post, your body says, no mas, no mas, no more. You need that break. And I often thought that that was depression. Um, there may be some depression involved at that point, but a lot of it is just your body saying, you know what, I don't care what you're doing, I don't care what you need to do or what you think you need to do. Um, we're gonna take a break. We're gonna shut down, and so that's kind of like a big thing for me in terms of the way ADHD is played out as an adult. Again, I would like to think that most people who know me kind of see certain traits in me. You know, can be, you know, most people can describe me, and most people will see the hardworking, productive, you know, kind of overachieving side, and that's always been part of my personality. The problem is I don't always show, and I've been ashamed of and embarrassed by the the other side of that coin. You know, when my body is having to balance that out. Um, so that's how it's played out for me. That and the RSD are the real ways that I've seen ADHD play out.
So John Lee just chimed in and said, "Is there a way that ADHD is your superpower?" And
Yeah,
I think, I think a lot of times about like my own mental health issues, and other people's, and sometimes that's true, right? Like sometimes that is your superpower, like I I can do 1,000 things. I can do this show, I can write a book, I can write a blog, I can do a full-time job, I can teach, I can do all of these things. And for me, that's like my superpower, right? And at the same time, I can also burn out really hard and really fast. So I think that, there's you have to embrace what you've been given, right? And sometimes that means that things work to your advantage, and sometimes it means they work to your disadvantage. Do you want to
yeah,
comment on that?
yeah. No, absolutely. It's interesting because a lot of people talk about ADHD as a superpower, and as you know, I think that I haven't quite gotten to that point yet. I'm still struggling with what it means to have ADHD. I I think that it's a way for people to come to grips with what might feel like a not quite a condition, but something that's debilitating or that undermines you at various turns. In my mind, at least, thinking of ADHD as a superpower is a result of someone kind of getting to that next level of comfort and understanding and calm, and seeing the benefits and seeing the positives of it. I mean, at the end of the day, I wouldn't be who I am without ADHD. I wouldn't have had the experiences I've had over 30 years in terms of as a professional, since graduating college. This year is my 30th reunion. Um, it's still I'm still at the point where I'm struggling and frustrated, and I see kind of the negatives to it. Um, so John, I appreciate you mentioning that. That's a common kind of term that people use to think about their ADHD. I'm just not there yet, I don't think.
And he did say, I put the comment up on here. He did say, I don't know if
Yeah,
ADHD could be a superpower,
Jonathan
but I
Borstein.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do think you can make it work for you, or perhaps more clearly work with it to accomplish things. So he did make that clarification.
yeah. So
And just so you know,
John Lee made the earlier comment about it being a superpower.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah, no,
sorry.
that's all right.
I
The
cannot scroll up on the comments
Oh yeah,
for some reason, Neil. So I know that I missed a
no
couple,
worries.
but I can't scroll up. I can only
I'm
scroll down.
here. I'm here to help you out.
Thank you.
So let's see. We saw Stefan's comment, and
Your
my
sister made a
mom said
comment about
earlier,
AP
AP.
history too.
I see that. And my mom said both of us have guts, but both of you talked about your mental health issues, and she's proud of us. So thank you, Mom. And John said thank you for sharing your truth. I appreciate that, John. I really do. So you mentioned, so can you see Amy's comment? Do you want
I
to
cannot.
take it from
I
there?
cannot. I
You
can't
cannot.
scroll
Okay.
up for some reason.
When I
Very
get to your
frustrating.
comment that you can see, let me know. So Amy says to give everyone context. She just told Emily. Emily was there last week for vacation. That he was such a good student in European history that when I took the class with the same teacher 5 years later, the teacher actually distributed a copy of, oh my Lord, I didn't know that, of one of Neil's essays and said it was, oh my Lord. That's the first time I'm hearing that. I didn't know that at all, Amy, that it was one of the best he had read in 20 years.
That's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, that is crazy. That was, Mr. Rittner's class was very, very meaningful for me. Thanks for sharing that, Amy. Uh, let's see.
I
I'd
think
shared
that
the
might be,
post. That was
yeah, I think
and
that
then
might be,
Jonathan's is the last one. So you're at
yeah.
the end now.
Yeah, so I'm at the end
Um,
there. So Neil, I wanted to because I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about how when you first started this show, we talked a lot offline about how much you were willing to share about your own personal experiences. And one of the things that really resonates with me is when we did the show about suicidal ideation. And
yes,
you and I had some pretty serious conversations about how willing we were to kind of unmask that piece of our lives. And in that show, both of us talked about our own suicidal ideation. Um, and so, first, I just want to say, like, huge leaps and bounds, I think, uh, for you in particular, for me as well, in terms of, some of the things that I've talked about that I hadn't shared before. But for you, um, as I've watched this transformation of you really sharing these very, very personal things about your life, um, do you want to talk a little bit about the impact that this show has had on you, in terms of, kind of talking about these things and what they've done for you personally?
sure, sure. Um, so I'm glad you brought that up. When we started the show, and I'll pull in, you know, the blog post that I had written for that show. Um, it was looking back. So we to kind of trace that arc. Uh, when I did the show with Candace, I shared a blog post about being abused when I was 7. And then when I started the show with you, I did a blog post, and it was really, pretty straightforward. Um, I suffer from anxiety and occasional depression, and I don't want to feel embarrassed about it. I don't want to feel about anxiety. I don't feel embarrassed about depression. And for me, when I wrote those words, I felt like I was revealing like the biggest secret in the world. It was, I couldn't. It to me, it was such a huge thing that I was sharing. And when we talked about the show, there were things that similar to when I did with Candace, that like there were things that I was willing to talk about. I was willing to push myself to talk about, and there were things that like I'm not ready. I wasn't ready last February to talk about suicidal ideation. That was too scary for me. That was too much uh, to put out. And then as the show progressed, and we had a guest last year, Cindy Shu from New York, who I Srinivasan, put me in touch with her. She had shared her story on TV, on the news, and she was willing to come on our show. And I said, okay, if she's going to talk about it, I'll talk about it as well. And for folks who may not have seen that episode or don't know, suicidal ideation can take on different forms. In my case, I didn't make any concrete plans. I didn't put anything in my hands or put myself in a position to hurt myself. Twice, though, I pictured myself hurting myself. In one case, I pictured myself standing over a bridge in the neighborhood we lived in, kind of over a creek, maybe like some not like a interstate bridge or anything, but tall enough. And I pictured myself standing there, and it wasn't even like a picturing myself jumping off or stepping. It was just enough that I was like standing there in my mind's eye, and that freaked me out like you wouldn't believe. Um, Earlier, that actually happened later. That example. Earlier, no, that happened first. I'm sorry. Then later, I was in Seattle at one point, and I was sitting in a park bench, uh, not that far from where a lot of buses were coming on campus at the University of Washington, and I pictured myself stepping in front of a bus. Now I was, you know, at least 50 yards from the street. Like, it wasn't like I was on the sidewalk. It wasn't I was like on TV, you see people like right at the edge of a train or subway platform. I was sitting on a bench, but this is where my mind went, and that freaked me out. But talking about you know other things that have come up over time, sharing these experiences, these emotions, things that I've kept bottled up for years. At least for me, it's done what I'm hoping the show does in general. It's normalized the conversation. I now talk about mental health with people, kind of with a little bit more ease, with a little bit more comfort. It helps that I'm talking about the show and I'm explaining what we do, but it's something that I feel much more um, comfortable addressing. I mean, even to the extent like if you want to talk about how these things evolved on, um, even before we did the show, I would have been too embarrassed to like or comment on a post that had to do with mental health. Not even, and I talk a lot about what you put out on social media, but like, if Nami puts something out or if someone shares something, I would have been hesitant to even give it a like because it might say something about me, right? I was embarrassed to, be identified in any way with that, and
And I want to say
that's
something.
changing.
Yeah. I want to say something about that, Neil, because I find it to be so interesting because it's such a juxtaposition because you are so incredibly, incredibly supportive of me and the way how forthright I am about my own mental health and how, I talk so freely and openly about that. Um and and like knowing how supportive you are, the fact that you would feel that sense of embarrassment.
Yep. um 1 second, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's really interesting that you that you were hesitant to do that, and now you actually comment on a lot of my posts when I post about mental health. um and I've seen that, like, I think the first time that you liked something that I had written about my mental health, I was like, whoa, he actually liked that post. And then when you started commenting, I really recognized like how important of a step that was for you in terms of really becoming an advocate for yourself and others when it comes to mental health awareness. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I see the same kind of pattern with ADHD, where when I first was diagnosed, I saw like I didn't want to follow anything, any pages or groups around ADHD or comment or like, at the risk of tipping my hand, of telling people that I have ADHD without telling them. I wasn't ready for that, and I know that with this show, with this episode, with the putting the blog post out there, um, it is something that I am in a position to embrace now and share what I know, share what I'm experiencing, and this show has meant so much for me in that way. Putting this content out there, hoping that if it helps someone, great. I mean, I said this all the time with the show we did with Candace. If somebody watches and they that was focused on male survivors of sexual abuse, and if it helped someone to hear someone's story, great. If no one watched and no one engaged with those episodes, it was a year-long masterclass for me to kind of understand what I'd gone through and come to grips with it and learn and grow. I thought of it like a seminar. Every month I got to learn from someone else, and that's kind of my approach with this show. That I'm learning and growing with each episode, with each conversation we have. And I'd like to think that other people are benefiting from it as well. If only to hear us talk about it and to hear us post about it and kind of go into some detail more than just, like a social media post you might make about how you're feeling, which I will always say I take inspiration from, because I'm still not completely there, but I would like to think that this has given both you and I a framework, a platform to delve a little deeper on a certain topic and write a blog post and explore what it's like to be a parent, what it's like to be to deal with suicidal ideation, to what it's like to struggle with resilience, like we did at the end of the year.
Yeah.
There's got to be some benefit to it.
Yeah. And Candace just said, we're all learning and growing together. Thank you for keeping the conversation alive. It's so important, giving us a voice about our mental health. And I think that's, that speaks volumes to what I think, you, by creating this show, what you've done. But also I think the community of support through this show. We have a lot of people that return and watch the show every 2 weeks. We have a lot of people that I know that can't watch it because it's not at a good time for them, but go back and watch these episodes and take things away from them. I know you've had people who've reached out to you and said thank you. I've had people who've reached out to me and said thank you. Do you feel as though you're accomplishing what you set out to accomplish when you created this show, or is it even more than you anticipated? Like, how do you feel about that?
So the goal when I came up with the idea of the show, and I want to, for folks who may not have heard it the first time, but particularly because Steve's parents are watching, I kicked around the idea in my head, and the first person I spoke to about the idea was my friend Steve Taylor. I was giving him a ride home after an event in New York City that November. So this was November of 2023. He and I had talked about some of the challenges we each had around mental health, and and I said, "Hey, I was thinking about this idea. What do you think? Would you be willing? Would you be willing to help me with the show? Would you be a guest? Do you think that people would respond to it?" And that was the first kind of conversation. And when I called you, and I, I say famously because we've said that shared the story so many times. I asked if you'd be a guest, and you said sure. How about if I'm a co-host? And you did what I did to Candace. Um, you which was incredible. Um, but I was using those conversations to kind of test the idea. Um, I do want to make it a point because another person I spoke to early on was my colleague Srinivasan, who runs Digimentors, and he actually he was very supportive. We've had a few conversations about mental health, and one of the things he said was that find yourself a co-host. Don't do this alone. Don't try and carry the burden. And I think I had actually talked to you earlier. Sorry, I said got that done. And the support that he's given me, that my colleagues at Digimentors has given me. I didn't call them out by name, but a lot of the folks that were watching that commented earlier, um, you know, Paula Kiger and Stefan Kaplan in particular. I know Rose Horowitz has watched several shows. Apollo has watched several shows. They've really not just helped amplify the show, but also supported me in this effort. So I do want to give a quick shout out because Digimentors does give me the time and space to produce this show, and the resources, the platform, etc. So I really want to appreciate and thank not just Sri but all of my colleagues for their support. But the goal was to reduce the stigma around mental health, to not to not be embarrassed by it. What I put in my first blog post, I didn't want to be embarrassed talking about it, and at least around the terms anxiety, and I was very intentional when I talked about anxiety and occasional depression, because even I couldn't imagine saying that I suffered from depression, because to me that means that's a constant state, that I'm just depressed and not functioning and not doing anything, and that certainly wasn't the case. But I was embarrassed. I was concerned that people would think that. But I am no longer embarrassed to talk about that. So if we lowered the stigma for one person, me, I accomplished one goal. If I would ask you in terms of it has, for someone who, as I perceive, was more comfortable talking about mental health and more public about it, um, has co-hosting the show, has writing about these issues on a regular basis, has that changed your thinking about mental health?
Hey, now you don't get to flip the switch on me. No, I will say that, I mean, writing for me has always been something that's been really, really helpful, and being able to, I mean, I very rarely miss writing a blog for this show, because no matter what the topic, I can find a piece inside me that can relate to something, whatever the topic may be. So that's really, really cathartic for me. I mean, I never talked about my memory loss or memory
Yeah,
lapses.
yeah.
I didn't share that really with anybody except very, very close personal friends and family members. So talking about that was really scary for me because, I had a similar reaction where I was like, well, I don't want people to think like I have dementia, right? Like that's a bad, like like these are things that people, experience and they walk through in life. And I just was like really nervous about that. So yes, I will say that it's been very helpful for me, and very emotional and very cathartic, as well. So Neil, I would like to just bring up a couple of the slides that we have put together that have some stats about ADHD on them, and also some of the what are they called? Like how symptoms.
Symptoms.
Of,
Okay.
yeah, symptoms of ADHD. Because I know when we were talking about those symptoms, you had said, yeah, there are some of these are true for me, but not all of these are true for
Sure.
me.
Sure.
So do you want
So
to walk us through that, please?
yeah. Yeah. So NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, a group that we refer to often, put this document together, looking at some of the symptoms of ADHD. Um, and I and I'd have to look back at the document, but I think it says a lot of it is based on when ADHD shows up in younger individuals, but some of the signs of inattention, becoming easily distracted and jumping from to activity, becoming bored with the task quickly, difficulty focusing on a single task, trouble completing or turning in homework assignments, losing things, not listening or paying attention when spoken to, daydreaming, wandering, difficulty processing information quickly, struggling to follow directions. I would look at that list and say, you know, even even if I thought initially that a lot of it was mostly the stereotypical 10-year-old bouncing off the walls, uh, about half of them are things that I can relate to. And for example, like um, I, I think this is an interesting thing to think about, to reframe. I've always multitasked. I've always, um, you know, uh, worked on several projects at the same time, or emails, or I'll bounce, as I'm working on something, I'll think of something else and realize I have to take care of that as well. And, it's not and it makes it hard to try and keep a timesheet, because it's not like a clear 15 minutes, 20 minutes on one thing. Okay, stop. And then switch 20 minutes on something else. A lot of it is kind of bouncing back and forth. And it's, that just has been second nature to me. Certainly, losing things has been a problem in the past, but there are also ways to kind of counteract that. I used to not have a place to put my keys in my wallet as a regular place, and finally, I just said, you know what, I'm gonna the center drawer of my bureau behind me on the wall. You can't quite see it because I'm in the way, but I just
Mhm.
dumped my keys and my wallet in there, and now it's like it's 90% of the time I can find them. Occasionally I might leave them on my side table or something. Um, Hyperactivity, fidgeting, squirming. It's interesting. I actually didn't think when I did the assessment. I'll talk a little bit about the assessment process. It's an online screening, an online survey that you do, and based on your answers, then and this is how this firm that I worked with, Dr. Dodini, Dodini, the way that they do the testing. um, you do an initial online screening, and they say, like, are you likely to have ADHD or not? um, and I can't remember if it was in that or in the follow-up testing, but one of the things they ask about it, do you fidget? And I didn't think I did. um, but then I realized later that I've always, even going back to high school, I do kind of interesting things with my fingers in terms of tapping out syllables, or hearing a phrase and then I just kind of repeat the phrase in my mind. Or it just there's something that I do. uh so I had no idea, which was really interesting. I didn't even think about it. um the touching or playing with everything. Yeah, there are a lot of the signs of impulsivity, impatience, acting without regard for consequences, difficulty taking turns, waiting or sharing. I think I'm fairly good about that, and I know I've worked on interrupting less. That's sometimes been an issue. Um, I guess it's just one of the things that I am maybe sensitive about is this whole idea of the stereotype of ADHD being the hyperactive 10-year-old, and I don't think that that's me. Maybe it is. But there's still kind of stigma. There's stigmas around ADHD. So this name badge, glad you put it up, from the coaching that I'm getting. The coach, kind of what she said just this week was that um, she would really like to reframe it, to rename uh, ADHD. It's not attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. The name itself brings up all sorts of connotations, but it's a dysregulation disorder that we're just not, balanced, and kind of the reason I think they named their firm Calibrate ADHD is the idea of to be calibrated is to kind of have everything working in sync with each other and balance. And what happens for a lot of people with ADHD, things are thrown off. Your sense of self, your sense of whether should I be doing this at this moment or should I not? Am I putting too much attention on this, or should I be focusing on this? Like your mind just starts racing, and that's that idea of being dysregulated. Um, my hands are up. So, folks, this is Dawn driving this bus right now. More than half of the adults with ADHD were diagnosed in adulthood, which I thought I didn't know that. That's actually really interesting. And among adults taking stimulant medication, a majority, 71%, reported difficulty getting their prescriptions filled due to the lack of availability. That's really unfortunate. I am taking medication. It is a stimulant. It's Adderall, and it's I don't know if I have the explanation quite right. I was surprised that's what you give people with ADHD. You would think if they're hyperactive, why are you giving them something that gets them more worked up? And in fact, what it is, it's to counteract the times when you're not hyperactive or productive, hyper focused, to help smooth, even things out to a certain extent. So this is the resource, as Dawn keeps us moving at a good clip. The Calibrate ADHD is the group that I work with, and I'm looking for my ticker. There we go. Their website, Calibrate, run that as a ticker. CalibrateADHD.com is their website, and that's what they talk about. Their three things are self-support, so kind of understanding kind of what you need to do to support yourself, self-discovery. There's a lot of learning, a lot of education that needs to happen to understand. A lot of this is about understanding how your brain works, how does ADHD manifest for you, and if you can figure that out, then the tethering is developing strategies and lifestyle changes so that you can kind of even things out a little bit, smooth things out along the way. But if anyone is interested in learning more, their website, calibrateadhd.com, it mostly has information on kind of their services they provide. It's less focused in terms of, you're not going to find a lot of blog posts or content to understand ADHD there. But I am more than happy to share what I know. And, there's a lot of great information that they provide. More than happy to put you in touch with folks. The testing that they do, so it's really interesting. There's a screening, and then when you do the online test, it's like a 20-minute, maybe a 30-minute test where, you know, you can't see it from your perspective, but you sit in front of your computer, and they want you to be in a quiet environment without distraction. And there are things that'll flash on screen, and you use your mouse to kind of, did you see the letter A? Did you see the letter B? Did you see this shape after this shape, and colors? You're responding to different things. But what they're actually measuring is how focused can you stay with that task in hand. And when I looked at my results, I was good for the first quarter. I didn't move around a lot, but then at the end, I'm like moving all over the place. And my eyes are kind of, you know, I'm trying to keep myself awake, and that kind of thing. And they use that to determine what your level of focus is. So I thought that was really really interesting. When I met with the doctor, he told me that I scored off the charts, that I did very well. Not necessarily the way I wanted to,
So
but yeah.
so we try to stay as close to on time as we can, and right now it's 7:01, and I would be remiss if I didn't just talk about our guest in 2 weeks, Amanda Krantz. She's going to be talking to us about a mother's heartache, a mother's resilience. And Amanda is an incredibly good friend of mine who has just experienced a lot of grief. She lost a child at, I'm not sure if it was 3 months. She'll be able to better tell you, but it was in a very short period of time. And she's a fantastic human being, and it's right around Mother's Day, and we just thought that this would be a really great show to honor her and give her some space to talk about her grief.
Yeah, looking forward to that show. And as you mentioned, it is the just a few days before Mother's Day. I do want to bring a comment up. I've been you know, mostly hands off in terms of producing, but I do want to give Lori Spellman a shout out. Lori is in the group with me at Calibrate. So you know, they're people. It's a cohort of folks who are participating in the you know, one of 3 sessions during the week. And you know, Lori, thank you so much for watching. For folks who may have joined late, as soon as the show is over, you'll be able to watch from the beginning. You may have, regulars will have heard me say this before. You'll be able to watch from the beginning on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. We'll upload a clip to Instagram. You'll be able to watch it on my website as well from the beginning. But I will note, Facebook actually has a new policy. They're taking down videos after 30 days, Facebook Lives. So you know, watch the beginning as soon as you can. But Lori, I want to thank you for all the work that you've done, and I really appreciate being in the group with you. I've learned a lot from you, and I know that we're both trying to figure things out. And thank you for watching. I see Amanda's been watching as well, our guest for our next episode. The show, in case people are wondering about the timing, the show airs the 2nd and 4th Thursdays of the month. Dawn and I talked about this when we first launched it. Weekly would have been too much, and you know, instead of every other week, it was my crazy idea that to say 2nd and 4th Thursday, because it rolls off the tongue easier. Otherwise, you know, you kind of, how do you, when you think about the calendar, it's not as predictable. But it does give us a chance to take a break and plan for the next show, and you know, go in prepared. But Amanda, so glad that you're watching and that you're able to join us for this special Mother's Day edition in May.
And I would be remiss if I did not mention that next Wednesday, April 30th, is Denim Day, which is a day to wear jeans and honor survivors of sexual assault. This is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I needed to mention that you please wear your jeans next week, Wednesday, April 30th. to support and honor survivors of sexual assault. Um,
Absolutely. And Dawn, I want to, in honor of that, I want to share a quick picture. Dawn has no idea where I'm going with this, but this is something that's very meaningful to me, and I know Dawn thinks about this as well. This was one of the pictures that we took at United Way Worldwide for Denim Day. When I was working at United Way Worldwide, Dawn wrote about this in her blog post. I organized, I heard about Denim Day from Dawn and immediately wanted to help support it because of my experience of being a survivor, but it wasn't something I'd shared with anyone yet. So I, shared it with the network. I got other United Ways to be involved. I got United Way Worldwide to be involved, and all without kind of revealing my truth. And we had for the last couple of years. 2019 was the last year before the pandemic, but for 2019 and 2018, we had about 100 people. I'd say 75 to 100 people wear jeans and join us at noon for the group picture. And we even had people who were off site once or twice, like the resource development team. They still participated even though they were in a retreat elsewhere.
That's fantastic.
So I just wanted to share this with you.
That's really awesome. As we're wrapping up, I wanted to, and Neil, I'm going to let you read this comment.
I saw who made the comment and saw the first word. So Eileen Taylor, Steve Taylor's mom, all you have talked about describes Steve so well. I hope he had shared with you his recent diagnosis of ADHD and more recently RSD, Rejection Sensitivity Dysphoria. Thank you for talking about this important and evidently underdiagnosed issue. Surely you're helping more than one person. Eileen, thank you so much for sharing that. Those conversations with Steve meant a lot to me, and I'll share what someone I shared my blog post with someone that I'm close to from Seattle, and her immediate response was, "Well, I knew there was a reason I liked you." And she had shared that she had been diagnosed herself 2 years before, and that she had also suffered from anxiety and depression. And I think that that's what I'm finding is that there are a number of people that have reached out after I put out these posts to share their story, to tell me they understand. And there is a sense of knowing someone, of kind of connecting with them, feeling that empathy without realizing why. And when we talk about it, it kind of brings it to the fore. I want to share one other anecdote, if I can, Dawn. And I see Amanda is saying I can completely relate to the adult ADHD as well. It was an enlightening show. Thank you, Amanda. 2 weeks ago, Dawn, if you remember, we had Jim Yu as a guest, who and I can't remember if I shared it or if I knew it on our last episode, but his daughter has borderline personality disorder, and he was able to get her the help she needed. At a reception, another colleague of mine from United Way, who was actually on his team, came up to me and said, "I saw the post that you put out. I saw Jim's post. My son also has borderline personality disorder, and I didn't know about the resources, and I didn't know about. It's so good to hear that his daughter got the help she needed, and they're doing better." She and Jim never talked about it. It never came up in conversation, and she was going to follow up with him when he got back after a vacation. So just that idea, by opening ourselves up, by sharing what our experiences have been and talking about it, will attract others and be able to have those supportive conversations that if we just keep quiet, we wouldn't be able to have. And I think that's what this show has really done for me.
And I think on that note, I think we're going to wrap this up. Amy says, Eileen Taylor, thank you for sharing. Neil, thank you so much for agreeing to let me interview you today. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say the more we hear stories like yours, the more we can reduce the stigma of mental health, and then we can begin to focus on mental wellness. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Again, you can rewatch this on most platforms as soon as the show is over. We appreciate every one of you, and we'll see you in 2 weeks when we'll interview Amanda Krantz. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Neil.
Thank you.
Goodbye.